artistas,
producers,
cantantes,
writers,
productores,
singers,
ingenieros,
performers. These are the up-and-coming people that you ought to know.
Estas son las personas que tú deberías conocer.
People to look out for.
En la mira.
Conmigo Lía, de El Flow.
With iHeartRadio.
And today, Young Onassis. Y aquí estamos con iHeartRadio celebrando hoy nuestro talento nuevo. Yes, we celebrate new talent and we also take care of the people that are up and coming. Y yo tengo ahora en este momento en la línea a Young Onassis. He is an emerging producer engineer based in LA. He has worked with Def Jam Records, Maybach Music Group, Atlantic Records, Walt Disney Records. He's worked with everybody. And he's also worked on the video game Fallout New Vegas. So tell me a little bit about that. What's going on with that, Onassis?
Leah, how you doing? What's up, everybody? Is a company, they produce a video game called Fallout New Vegas, and I was one of the developers that worked on that project. And, you know, being involved with a project at that level, the success that it had, it has been tremendous. The video game on Xbox is very popular, so all my gamers out there, they know what I'm talking about, Fallout New Vegas. You know, that was a huge opportunity to get to work on a project like that, to see how, you know, productions go on the film and video game side. It's really interesting to see that and then be able to implement some of those techniques into the music production.
What exactly did you do with them, though? Did you produce the music? Is that what you did?
Dialogue recording, voiceover recording, and I did dialogue editing. So I was working hand in hand with the actors. They had a big cast for that video game. They had Matthew Perry. He was the lead actor on that. So I worked directly with the actors, recording the voices, and doing the sound editing for that project.
Tell us a little bit about the projects you're working on right now.
Right now, I'm working on a project with J.R. Rodham's former artist, Man. He's a West L.A. native, and him and I linked up. Shout out to my manager, and we've been producing some records for him. I have a few records that we're going to drop at the top of the year, as well as a music video to accompany. Just trying to stay active with as many artists that I can. You know, being involved in Westlake, you know, Leah, is mad history from Michael Jackson to Rihanna, like so much history and, you know, vibes in Westlake. So just getting to be in that environment is a dope networking opportunity, and I run into artists all the time. You know, I've gotten to work with Nas there. I've worked with, you know, Rihanna, Chris Brown there, Kevin McCall, Seven Streeter. I've been blessed to work with Scott Storch, you know, did some things up in there, some recording and production. So, you know, just staying involved in every asset of the production, you know, that's where I try to carve my niche, you know, as being a producer, engineer, you know, somebody that can come in and be involved with your project from start to end on any side of it.
And you're originally from Phoenix, Arizona, so I want to go back to the beginning. Tell me how you started, where you got your name. I want to know the old school of Young Onassis. Where did you come from, and how do we inspire other people to become what you've become?
My family originally is from Nigeria, Africa. You know, that's where my parents were born. So I'm first generation, you know, American. My parents moved to Phoenix and had me and, you know, my younger brother there. And, you know, I grew up in Phoenix, and, you know, that plays into everything. You know, Young Onassis, the name comes from Aristotle Onassis. So the whole Young Onassis moniker, the name, just represents being a young boss, being a young entrepreneur, a young mogul, have you will. The name Onassis is like the Rockefeller name. It's like he's a dude from Greece. When I did some of my traveling abroad in Greece, you know, just seeing the culture there, learning about Onassis, that really inspired me to take upon his name and that likeness, you know, of being a young boss. And that's what the Young Onassis name represents. And, you know, Phoenix is dope, man. But that definitely plays into the music, to the inspiration, to the grind to want to, you know, make it out of a city like that and put Phoenix on the map, because Phoenix is yet to be, you know, on that stage like, you know, a Miami or a L.A., you know, Houston or New York. You know, that's kind of my mission. And I just try to inspire people by my story, by, you know, my grind. You know, I started off from the bottom, going to school like every other regular person, trying to pursue music. You know, I ended up dropping out of college, enrolled into an audio engineering school and got my degree, graduated with a 4.0, moved to LA and just started grinding from there. As you know, it's history. You know, I get my first big project, land a gig with Chris Brown, and from there the momentum just builds. And it's just amazing what you can do when you believe in yourself. Don't let anybody stop you from what your dream is. That's how I try to inspire people. You can do it too. You know, it doesn't matter what your background or race or whatever. You know, you can be in Colombia, you can be in Arizona. You know, if you have that drive and you're willing to put yourself out there and go full force, the sky's the limit. And, you know, somehow the universe, this energy always meets you halfway. You know, that's just what I try to do. And it's been a beautiful thing. We're rocking. We got a lot of major projects in the works. We're working with a lot of top A&Rs and managers for a lot of major placements for the next year to come. been everywhere from the Revolt Conference that just happened in Miami, networking with Chubby Baby. He's an A&R with L.A. Reid right now, Puffy and his son, and Groovy, and just so many names.
But how do you end up, how do you go from just Phoenix, Arizona to working with Chris Brown? I want the actual nitty-gritty of that story. ¿Qué fue lo que pasó? How did you get to that point to start working with such a superstar?
Like I mentioned, I went to this music school, and once I graduated from this school, they offered an internship program. So I said, I want to go to L.A., and I want to work in Westlake. Michael Jackson is my personal inspiration. That's my biggest hero. So, I knew Michael Jackson worked there. That's where he did Thriller. That's where he did all the big records. So that's where I aspired to work. When I got to L.A., I landed the internship there at Westlake, and I literally just started as an intern and just showed the upper-level management that I was worthy to be one of those rooms engineering. It's crazy how life works. The studio manager sent out an email saying, hey, would anybody like to volunteer for a session tonight? He didn't say who the artist was or anything like that, but I was quick. I was on it. And that's what I always try to tell people. You can't let opportunities pass you by. The moment you see something that can benefit you, gotta jump on it. When I got to the session that night, the session was Kevin McCall. K-Mac, forgive me. I didn't know who Kevin McCall was at the time. I didn't recognize the name. So, when I got to the session, Kevin McCall is the artist that signed to Chris Brown. Come to figure out, that session turned into Chris Brown showing up, cutting a whole bunch of records, and I'm the one recording him. It's just amazing how a volunteer opportunity turned out to be such a huge blessing in disguise by just me taking a chance to stay some extra hours at the studio that day. And that's how I got my start with Chris Brown, and just like that. And then the next session started rolling in. I got booked for another session with Scott Storch. I got booked for a session with Rihanna. This was when she was doing We Found Love in a Hopeless Place, Calvin Harris, back in 2011. So on that session as well, and that's just how everything snowballed.
It sparked my curiosity with you, is that you are able to kind of like mix all these different genres of music. You can go from hip-hop to dance to R&B, now electronica and EDM. Where did you get all your knowledge of all these different genres of music?
Just growing up in a multicultural environment, Phoenix, being African, having all these influences around me. I have 5 older brothers and sisters, tons of influences and people around me growing up. I'm just open to all styles of music. I love the early house, progressive house music, like Rhythm of the Night, came out in the early 90s and things like that, The Real McCoy. I'm a fan of everything. Just being open like that is how I'm able to cross over different genres. I love to collaborate with other producers and artists, so if there's a genre that I might not understand as well, I'm that guy that's saying, hey, I don't know everything. Let me learn from you, show me how you laid that bass line. How did you, arpeggiate that synth? That's how I try to get myself involved in all the aspects, just being open to all styles of music, all genres, and being open to collaborate with people.
That started with you opening the door. That's the big lesson for me, for you to actually be willing to not lose or waste that opportunity. Would you say that?
That was it. That was the defining moment. I could have said no. I could have, I don't want to stay extra hours. I'm not even getting paid. I could have made so many excuses, but I didn't let any of that sway me off of my goal, what my vision was, hence the name Your Vision. I didn't let anything stop me from that. And it's such a humbling experience when it happens for you like that. It's like, wow, this is completely out of my power that this happened just by me being faithful to my dream and my goal. It comes with a lot of humility. I'm very grateful, very blessed, and I'm just, excited for everything the future has to offer.
And so what do we have to look forward in the year 2016 with Young Onassis? What are you working on right now? What's the future goals? I want to hear more about that. And also, I'd like to hear a little bit about Your Vision, which you just mentioned. Tell me a little bit about that project.
Your Vision is, the production company that I signed to as a producer. I also serve as the CEO of the company. It's something I founded early on back in 2009, and we do everything from audio production, videography to film. So we work with a number of artists in various facets. We've worked with, Rick Ross doing photo shoots with him at a few concerts. We've worked with NBC San Diego doing, coverage of concerts here in San Diego and the LA area. So we're just, trying to be involved with everything that we can. As far as 2016, you can expect a lot more records. Expect me to come down to Miami doing more traveling. The record coming out with Man. I have some stuff coming out with a few other A&Rs I've been working with. Hopefully be landing a few major placements here in the next year and hear more of me on your radio.
You heard it from the man himself. That's Young Onassis. You can expect to hear a lot about him this coming year and onward. He's a one-man show that can do it all, from producing, engineering, songwriting. How can we connect with you, or how can our listeners connect with you?
You can connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Young Onassis. That's spelled YOUNG ONASSIS. You can check me out on SoundCloud, same thing, Young Onassis. Follow my production company, YourVisionEntertainment.com. That's Vision, VISION, entertainment.com, as well as on IG and Twitter at Your Vision ENT LLC.
What would be your advice for those young people that are trying to make it into this industry?
Stay humble, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. What I mean by that is, don't overcomplicate things. You have everything you have right now at this moment in time. Use what you have, your resources. If you only have a little MacBook, don't think that you need to be in a big studio to make a big hit record. Use what you have and do what you can. Use your network, use your resources. It's crazy how life works. When you follow those rules somehow, some way, somebody will notice you and be willing to help. So my advice to people out there, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can.
That's actually very wise advice from young Onassis. And I'm telling you, based on my experience, he's an emerging producer engineer based out of LA and one of the people to look out for in the year 2016. And we thank you so much for taking the time out to hang out with me, Leah, from El Flow, y también por estar con nosotros a través de iHeartRadio.
Thank you so much.
Artists,
Artistas,
producers,
cantantes,
writers,
productores,
singers,
ingenieros.
performers. These are the up-and-coming people that you ought to know.
Estas son las personas que tú deberías conocer.
People to look out for.
En La Mira,
Conmigo, Leah, de El Flow.
with iHeartRadio.